This week we're talking about wildfires in Minnesota and North Dakota, the Oxcart fire near Mentor, and a separate fire that threatens Medora, North Dakota. Also, autonomous vehicles are being made awfully close to home. Mailboxes, John Deere or Case IH, hey, no problem. I'm not one to judge. And finally, the mailman in the rural 1970s we grew up in. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You got Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota, Grant Nelson in Thief River Falls at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. Dave, the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the weather because it's so doggone dry, not just because it fits in perfectly into the motif of Coffee Talk, but it is really starting to have an effect on the area, isn't it?
Yeah, it's getting on everybody's nerves for one thing, and I heard that we're at like 12% humidity, and that's when these fire danger warnings come up. I think at 20 is what they'd start, but it's so dry and then it's windy, and every one of the fires that have gotten away around here have been determined to have started in the road ditch alongside the highway. So it doesn't take but a flick of a cigarette right now, and with the wind and dryness, it'll start a fire.
Yeah, definitely will. We've had many red flag warnings around here. You had a pretty good sized fire out at Medora, didn't you?
Yeah, that one was electrical wires crossing each other and sparking, but it really got close to the amphitheater. Actually, I don't know if they control burned away from the amphitheater, but it's right up to the edge of the amphitheater out there, but nothing except for some, ashes and whatever got any harm done to it. I'm sure there was, fire crew after fire crew. When I've been out at Medora and it's been really dry, they seem to get dry lightning out there, and so many times during the middle of the night or even during the show, there'd be a lightning strike somewhere, and they'd have to head out in the park and put the fire out because there's a lot of grassland and stuff out there. And it's traditionally quite dry out there anyway. So now they must have some pretty good fire crews out there because them guys put that thing out in 60-mile-an-hour winds, 50, 60-mile-an-hour winds, and without harm to the town. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it is. I saw Governor Burgum even launched a couple of North Dakota National Guard helicopters. Now, we had our own fire up here, a very bad wildfire, put under the flame almost 13,000 acres. They called it the Oxcart fire. It was down over by Mentor, and it involved nearly 20 different agencies and about 100 fire trucks and grass rigs and other kind of firefighting gear. And it even pulled out the farmers to fight it. It did jump U.S. Highway 2, and there's a wildlife refuge called Glacial Ridge, and it was threatening buildings there. When I thought about it, the commercial contractors and the farmers came out with bulldozers and tractors to make fire breaks. I think sometimes, I wonder if we ever really truly understand how important it is to have these kinds of people living in our communities. I mean, we're always happy we have farmers, and we're happy we have people who have bulldozers and backhoes and that sort of thing. But these are the kind of folks who, when the chips are down, they really come out and they help people a lot. I mean, I remember back in 2012, we had lots of fires going on around the area up here, and there was farmers out there, digging back breaks a lot and digging up soil as fast as they could. And I think they're part of that built-in essence of the sauce that makes living in a small town area so good.
Yeah, I think so too. You see these small towns come together for any kind of a tragedy like that. Everybody's willing to, put their stuff at risk, themselves at risk, to preserve their community and help the others out. That's for sure.
Dang right. And speaking of that, just this one thing I wanted to put out there. We're going to go to a break here, not too far down the road, but a new monthly survey came out. This is the one that surveys 9 Midwest and Plain states, and it shows that we've recovered about half of the 120,000 jobs lost last year because of imposed restrictions to coronavirus. So I think we're starting to feel a little bit better now. I realize that a lot of that is probably government payments that came out to a lot of different elements of society, but it does feel like we're getting a little bit healthier, even though we're all worried a little bit about this droughty land. It does feel like we're getting maybe a little bit better, and that maybe people are going to start going out there and buying things and making our economy tick.
Yeah, I think so too. I was kind of surprised at the numbers because the number of jobs went up substantially.
Yep.
New jobs, but the number of new unemployment applications went up too. So I was kind of surprised at that because I thought one would temper the other. But anyway, it's good to hear that the number, and of course around here, the Midwest, what's coming up? I mean, they need fertilizer tender drivers, they need farm workers, all that kind of thing. So I'm sure just by the nature of the time of year, it helps some, so I'm glad to hear it's coming back, and I'd like to see it back at full steam.
That'd be just fine with me too, Dave. Hey, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about mailboxes, rural farm delivery, and maybe some of the weird effects this had on us growing up in Viking. Also, I want to talk a little bit about new technology if we have a chance to do that. We're going to take a break. We'll be back on the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You've got Dave Nelson in Carrington watching the west side, and Grant Nelson here in Thief River Falls watching the east side. Dave, when we took a break, we were talking about finding people to do the work of tender drivers, of any field work, that sort of thing. And that, of course, has brought up the subject of autonomy in the past, although I know there's probably enough people to do the work right now. They have talked about autonomy as a result of looking for people to do that sort of labor. Now, I thought this was something that kind of came out that was interesting. Polaris Manufacturing, of course, they're up in Roseau here, about 50 miles northeast of Thief River Falls, is pairing with Optimus Ride. I can't take responsibility for that name. That's an obvious takeoff on Optimus Prime. But they're an autonomous mobility service provider. And what they're doing is they're using that Polaris GEM vehicle that they used to make down in Fargo, that maybe they still make it, but it was bought out by Polaris, and they're going to use that vehicle to make an autonomous vehicle that would work on, say, academic campuses, even residential communities eventually, and more localized environments, maybe like large hospital campuses or something like that. They've already done this, though, for 2 years. The Optimus Ride's been using the Polaris GEM, 75,000 rides so far. So they're doing quite a bit of this autonomous stuff already. You had an autonomous experience the other day, too, didn't you?
Well, yeah, it was kind of funny. I was in Menards, and I was pushing my cart along, and I turned down this one aisle, and here's an autonomous floor scrubber, and it talks. It looks like it's set up for someone to drive it also, but it was driving itself around the store, and it came up to an obstruction, and it announced that there was an obstruction in its way, and then the obstruction cleared when a person walked by in front of it, and it was kind of cool. I had never seen one like that before, running autonomously. I've seen the people driving them all the time or walking behind them, depending on what size they are. But this one was doing its own thing.
They're going to have to program them, though, so they can say, I don't want to do this all the time. I shouldn't have to be the one mopping the floors all the time. When they can get them to that humanized level of autonomy, then they maybe will have something. Now, back in the old days, and it's still important at this time, but mail delivery was huge way back when, especially back in the 70s. And there was always the human contact you had with your rural RFD farm delivery person who'd bring the mail and put it in the mailbox. And there's the kind of an iconic view of mailboxes as being pretty rural. Now, I remember back in the good old days, Dave, you had already moved off, I believe, to Fordville, but we used to, well, let's see here. How can we say it? Yeah, we used to stalk the mailman because we wanted to get our Sports Illustrated magazine instead of like 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We wanted to get it when we came in from working in the morning so we could have it during dinner time. So the relationship between the people who got the mail back then and the mailman was a little bit different. It was much more close. And of course, in our case, even when you were a young man, that would have been Judy Utrenka, who passed away. She and her husband both passed away here this past winter. And matter of fact, within 24 hours of each other, and they were kind of iconic around Viking and much loved too. But getting your mail at the mailbox, it's kind of a big deal, you know?
Yes, it was. Actually, I'm sure the mailman knew every time when the milk checks were coming to the neighborhood. And I'm sure the farmers did too, because they were probably watching for the mailman at that time and hoping, hey, all right, it's payday today finally. And there was always some goodies coming in the mail. You know, it was rather unexpected to get a package in the mail when I was around, at least not like we get Amazon packages daily now.
Yeah.
But it was a big thing when the Montgomery Ward's box came or Sears box came.
Man, that was huge. And I remember sending out for things. I'd go in the back of Popular Mechanics, Popular Science, some of the farm magazines, and I'd order their brochures. Let's see here. I would order for gyrocopters and any kind of little communication equipment or ham radios or World War II salvage. Oh, I was big in that. And getting something in the mail from them, I mean, that was like, okay, my afternoon is made. Now, the other thing about getting your mail out on the farm or out in the rural area, you have a mailbox. And that also had a lot of personality. I remember Mom and Dad, I think, didn't they have a Holstein mailbox?
Yes, yep. And, you know, the poor thing was a regular casualty of the snowplow.
Yep.
As with most everybody. And some people had them in an old milk can or cream can, and they would just tip that over and go back out and tip it up. And a lot of them were mounted permanently with a post, and they'd either break the post off or break the mailbox off. I took and made one that was supposed to trip away. It just had a shear bolt at the bottom. I don't know if it ever got tripped or not. But anyway, I made that, I think, for that Holstein mailbox. And it was supposed to save it from getting wrecked, but it used to be, the snowplow used to be the bane of everybody with a mailbox out on the road, that's for sure.
Yeah, it sure was. And of course, now some people like to have a very personalized mailbox. Maybe a certain color and a certain shape that might match a tractor of a certain manufacturer. And now there's always that issue. I've felt it myself. I mean, if I put up an International Harvester or a Farmall mailbox, is that going to anger somebody who likes John Deere more? I think it's almost an issue. I mean, is somebody going to come by there and do some kind of havoc with it because of that? I mean, would I be safer, Dave, going with maybe an Alice Chalmers one where, unless you're of a certain age, you probably don't even realize that what is it, oxblood orange or whatever it was, that's actually a thing?
Yeah, I have my own Case IH mailbox here, and I hope it angers the John Deere people. Not to the point that they have to trash it, but you know, at least they have to drive by it every day. But yeah, I've seen a lot of different styles, and you know, they used to have that fiberglass tractor. Seemed like that was a big deal for quite a while.
Yep. And
they came in green and red, and I'm sure if you wanted an orange and a blue one, you could probably get them too. But there's it tells a lot about a person, and a lot of the farms like to have their name there. maybe not so much anymore. You know, there's other status symbols now for people, but I know people used to love to have their name off by the road. And like I said, maybe not as much anymore just because people are a little more leery of being identified, I guess.
Yeah, there's certain truth to that. Not like the good old days, and that was one of the things that was a good old day. Dave, you got anything else for us this week?
No, I guess not. I'm just hoping for rain, and maybe we'll get some April showers, which would be nice.
That sounds good. Happy Easter to you and yours, Dave.
Happy Easter to you guys, too.
Thank you very much. There he is, my brother Dave from Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.